I've got some really basic objects here. One's a cylinder, which we'll use as a test object, and this other one's a cylinder, just had the edges extrude, more like a gear. And many times what we've got to do is we've got to get a hold of these edges. Let me highlight these. The edges in the model to strip them out and use those as templates that we can make other objects from. And there's a lot of ways we can do that. We can also use borders, which we're going to cover here in a second. Okay, the first thing is something like this gear that's a specifically made shape. We may have to get a hold of the edges so that we can make a new object from it. I've selected one edge here, and I'm going to hit loop, and you'll see that loop selects all the way around the model. So it kind of selects that edge all the way around until it comes back and hits itself. In contrast, the ring command just goes up like a ladder and selects those sections there. So what we want is loop. And in this case, I'm going to use this create shape from selection. And that's going to bring up this command. It gives me a choice whether I want smooth or linear. In this case, since I have some right angle type angles, I'm going to use linear, and I'm going to call this gear. Say OK. And now you can barely see it. It's pink right there. We've made a new shape, and I'm going to select it here. It's right there. And if I pull this out, we'll move this up a little bit so you can see it. I have a gear shape, and it's a shape, it's not an object, that is perfectly fit on my model. I can then use this to, I'll scale it down a little bit. I can use this same shape and make it an edit poly, and then extrude out from this using bevel like we have been most of the class, and make another shape from this. So this is particularly useful with characters for arms, legs, clothing like belts and so forth, because we can use the existing geometry as like a pattern or a template. Went a little bit too far there with that. Back up a little bit. There we go. But now I have this separate object here that I've made from the edges of this object. Now over on this object, I'm going to delete this top piece. So that's completely hollow now. Now I have a border, which I can select. And borders are usually going to be big open areas. And they're just open edges is all a border is. And I can do the same thing with a border. So in this case I'm going to use smooth, and we'll call this border. And now I've made a separate piece there. You can see the pivot for these objects is going to still remain where the old pivot was. So my pivot was down here for this cylinder, and you may need to adjust the pivot for these new objects by moving your pivot back up into the area where your new object is. So you can see I've got this this new piece that would fit perfectly in there. Now there's a couple things we can do with these. I'm going to put this piece back over my old object and kind of fit it back in there. I'm going to make this an edit poly again. I'm going to extrude this piece up using bevel, just like we've been doing again. I'm going to extrude this out. I lost my train of thought there. There we go. I'm going to extrude this out. Not quite that much. There we go. Hit apply. This time we're going to go up. Apply one more time. We'll put a little edge on it there. So now we've got kind of a lid to our piece here. And I'm going to, at this point, grab a hold of this one. That's what I'm trying to do. Grab a hold of this edge. Use loop. Make a new shape from it. We'll call this trim path. We'll make it smooth. We're going to leave that right where it is for the time being. And I'm going to then grab a hold of a new object. I'm going to make a cylinder again here. This one's going to be very small. There we go. We're going to give this a ton of height segments because we're going to wrap this around our little tub here. And I'm only going to give this one 5 sides. And now I'm going to just do a quick path extrude so you can see how that path would fit our object. I'm going to keep the object selected and go to Path, Deform, WSM, pick the path, say Move to Path, and then I need to jump around here, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. And then I'm going to stretch this around. Stretch it around till it fits right around there. I can seam this up using target weld if I wanted to. And now I've been able to wrap something around that object using those edges. Another useful way of using the edges, same process. I'm going to get off this one. Go back to this guy. I'm going to select these here, hit loop. Once again, I'm going to make a create shape from selection. This one's going to be called gear template. And this time I want it to be linear. Here's my gear template. I'm going to get rid of both of these gears and just hide them. And we'll deal with this guy, so we've got some room. What I can do is just go back to the spline in this case, and I can hold down Shift and make more of these, so I can clone these if I want to. I can also get a hold of the vertices in the spline if I want. There we go, let's grab a hold of these. And I can move them. So you can adjust these later. This is a great way to deal with templates and floor plans for instance, with levels, because you can get a hold of these kind of blueprints and move them around and then create new objects from those original pieces. So I can move this piece, convert this to an edit poly, and now I have a new piece that I can bevel up or down with. We can also, I'm going to grab a hold of this, all the edges here, and I can use Shift and pull up on those edges. So right now I'm just holding down, well, not holding down Shift now, I'm holding down Shift when I make a new segment. Now it's making these inside out because my basic shape, the normal, is pointing up, so all these are going to point in. That's easy enough to fix. Just grab all the polygons and say flip, and now I've got this shape here that I can deal with. If we want to cap the top part, I can either build the polygons by hand, which might be a good idea in most cases, or I can just say looking for my tool. Well, we'll do this. I'm going to use a cap holes on top here, and we'll just cap the holes on that, and now we've made a new shape. So lots of things you can do with the edges. You're going to need to get used to using the edges as much as polygons. We've really been focusing on polygons up to this point, and when you get into the characters, you're going to have to do